Thanks so much, Michael, for taking time. My name is Kranti Manchikanti, and we are doing FDE Talks. I have Michael today. I want to introduce Michael.
So my name is Michael Levan. I'm an AI architect and forward deployed engineer at a company called Solo. My background has been kind of all over the place a little bit. I started out in like systems administration, like infrastructure engineering, all that. Somewhere down the line, I got more into coding. I got more into scripting. I really like software engineering and I like development. So then I went down that path. And then I met somewhere in the middle where, people were calling it DevOps at a time. Then people were calling it platform engineering. I don't know what it's called now, but effectively in my head, I think the roles have converged. When I first started out, you could be like the Microsoft Active Directory person or the Microsoft Exchange person, and then you focused on that one thing, and that was it. Now, the best expert is a generalist. So like instead of just focusing on one thing, if you're a generalist doing a little bit of everything and you understand how the infrastructure side works, the software side works, you're going to be far more effective at your role. I'm based out of New Jersey.
Yeah. Awesome. It's a very interesting point that you're bringing is being generalist will actually makes a lot of sense these days, especially with what we are seeing with AI. What do you think about like FDE role?
Well, I could give my take on it, but also what I would definitely tell everybody is like, go look at FDE job description. Like you could see a ton there's a lot of companies that are hiring FDEs right now. And you can see like there are some smaller companies that are doing it. And then there are some really large companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, that are doing it. You're going to see a couple of different pieces, right? Some of it is more like pre-sales. Some of it is more post-sales. Some of it is the entire cycle. Some of it is like, hey, you're at a customer site and you're there for 2 weeks at a time, right? And you're getting them into production. And then you go and you work on it with another customer. Some of them are, hey, you're working with 3 to 5 customers at a time. Obviously not at the same time, but maybe one day you're with customer A, the next day you're with customer B, etc. So you'll see a plethora of different descriptions. But the one thing that holds true across all of them is it's customer facing. Right. So like regardless of where you're going to be a customer facing engineer, right? You're not building the product internally. You're not the back end engineer, the front end engineer, or the middleware engineer. You are the engineer that is taking a particular product or a particular solution and helping a customer that bought it or is going to buy it implement it into production. And that's my description of it. So I personally like more so of the FDE is like spread across the entire cycle. You're in the discovery phase, you're in the POC phase, you're doing the demos, you're showcasing why the solution works in the environment and like what the customer is trying to do, ensuring that your product can handle it, and then actually going and helping to do the implementation. That's how I like it. But of course, that's going to depend on the person in the organization because some people can't do all of that. And that's totally okay, right? And some people just want to focus on the post-sale side or the pre-sales discovery side. And that's totally fine too. But for me, I like being across the entire cycle.
I see some organizations actually have this FDE person come back and implement the changes in the product as well. I don't know if that's like sustainable in the long run.
I think it's a good thing, especially right now, considering like, let's say you're not the strongest software engineer, but you understand architecture, you understand protocols, you understand how things like as in components are supposed to talk to one another. You can, of course, open up Claude or Codex or Grok and then build something out, at least for testing purposes, right? But at the same time, to your point, it's a trap, right? Because you got somebody that's doing pre-sales, post-sales, full customer discovery, going on site, and then you want that person to be the core software engineer as well. And that's, it gets to a point where like you're either A, working 16 hours a day, or B, you just simply can't keep it all in your head. Like you can't be an expert across everything, across every domain. You can't be the back-end engineer, the front-end engineer, the middleware engineer, the platform engineer, the DevOps engineer, the customer success engineer. You can, but like you're not going to mentally be able to give 100% in all of them. So I do think that like still having your core engineering team of software engineers and product engineers is very important.
For sure. Yeah, I'm on board with you on how much can you accomplish as as an FD or a product engineer, because you're still an engineer, right? So one thing which I've seen state of the field moving towards is keeping that forward deployed part and then changing the engineering aspects of the role as forward deployed strategist. I think suddenly we want a lot of insights from the customer because we can act on it immediately compared to the previous world, right? So now we can move fast, ship things really, really fast. And now we want to keep that closeness to the customer because that's very precious.
I do think as well that like a forward deployed engineer should not necessarily implement the thing, but at the same time, maybe work with product to help figure out how the thing could be implemented. Is it important? How many customers are going to ask for this? Is it just like a one-time total edge case? So yeah, I do think it's like a plethora of different things, but at the same time, I think what's important is you can't dive 100% into every single thing that you do. I don't know if that's time management. I don't know if that's brain management.
It's all of it. It's cognitive abilities. It's the company's priorities, all those moving parts which you are bringing together to make things happen. I'm curious. You mentioned you were systems engineering before, like getting into this role, and talk us a little bit more on Solo, how you bumped into this role.
Yeah. So my career, it started out more in the systems side. So systems engineering, systems administration. Then I moved more into development. And then I kind of met somewhere in the middle, right? In this like platform engineering realm. Before coming to Solo, I was actually self-employed for a long time. I was a consultant, so I would go and I would work with a lot of customers across their cloud native environments. So my background is really Kubernetes, observability, orchestration, cloud, like all that. So that was always like my sweet spot. So I did a ton of content on it, like a ton of paid content. And then I also did a lot of consulting. And that's what I was doing for a while. And then my buddy actually reached out to me and they were like, hey, like Solo's hiring. Would you ever think about going back to like a full-time role? Looking back on it now, it was never about, hey, I want to have a successful consulting firm or whatever, right? I just wanted to do cool stuff and make impact. I didn't care like if that was at a full-time job or if it was being self-employed, right? A part of me, of course, was like, hey, if I go back to a full-time role, am I quote unquote failing, right? And then eventually I was like, no, you know what? I was like, I think this makes sense, right? I think this is a nice step in my career. And then, so I started working at Solo, and that's when probably like 2 months later, we started to dive really deep into the full agentic stack. So we have K-Agent, which is like a runtime that runs on Kubernetes. You can bring your own framework, Crew AI, ADK, whatever, fully scale out and orchestrate your containers, or your agents running on Kubernetes, full sandbox with agent substrate and all that good stuff. An agent gateway, which is your AI gateway for observability, security, governance, etc. And then our registry, which is like a place to store and catalog and ensure shadow AI isn't coming for your organization when it comes to MCP and AI and such. So we started doing all these things, and I was like, oh wow, like this is an interesting space. And I was doing some stuff with AI prior, like everybody else was, but it wasn't my core role. It was a tool that I was using for my role. And then I turned it into my core role, and that's when I got really, really excited about it.
Do you have 4 or 5 customer engagements in parallel? You work with them, switch context, and build something for them? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's how a lot of FDE/solution architects will work. For me, I'm more of like an overlay or an escalation point. So what I do is I'll come in and I'll help for like, the level 400 stuff, right? Like if there's something very, very specific, I'll go in and I'll work with that, or I'll work with like very, very big customers. And I do that for both pre-sales and post-sales, right? So like, an account exec might say, hey, Mike, can you come on and do a demo on this niche topic, right? And I'll say, cool, no problem. And then somebody on post-sales might be like, hey, Mike, I'm implementing this in production. Like, have you ever seen this, right? And then I'll go and I'll help out on that. And then I also do my best to like stay across all of the accounts, but again, high level, right? Because I can't be deep in every single account. It would never work. I'm the escalation point, so to speak.
Very interesting. You are getting all those insights from the customer. So what would you do with those as an FTE? Do you, or the FTEs in general, take that feedback and go build it in the product direction?
So I would say it's a joint effort, right? So like the FDE/solutions architects will figure out, is this a new feature that needs to be implemented? Is this a bug? Is this something that a lot of customers will need eventually? Is this something that makes sense to implement in terms of like priority? Does it need to be done tomorrow? Can it be done next quarter? What does this look like? So really it's about strategizing what needs to be done and then going and working with product, because there's product owners for each product. The most important thing right now versus what can be pushed back, et cetera. And then we get with engineering to figure out how it's going to work, how it can be implemented, what's possible today, what's not possible. In my opinion, it's the art of the possible. It's thinking about what can be done and how it can be done, and then bringing that feedback to product and engineering to hopefully have the ability to implement it. And then at the same time, during that process, you also have to manage customer expectations. When can it be done? Why? How? A customer may want something, but when you explain it in a particular way, they realize, oh, I actually don't need that. So I think a really big part of the role is like truly understanding what the customer is actually trying to do, right? And then you can go back and you can implement it. You can work with product, you can work with engineering.
Awesome. I think you're hitting the nail on the head with one of the core traits of an FDE to be successful. So I call this peeling the onion approach, and might use different frameworks like asking why 3 times. Ideally, the way I see it is like whenever a customer comes to you, they might ask for something, but that's not what they might mean. They might have a whole different code problem which they want to solve. So until you get to the bottom of it, you are not solving the right problem. You are solving an immediate ask, which might earn their trust, and you might be able to be in a good books, but that doesn't either the customer or us, like from a product direction, because we don't get to understand what exactly the problem which might eventually surface again. Let's talk about like some customer example or something that you have worked with in an FT role, how it started, what you have done specifically, any lessons around those?
Yeah. So I would say a really good example is we have one customer that is a very, very big financial institution. And I was luckily able to see it all the way through. And when I say all the way through, I was on the first discovery call. I was on the first demo. I did the demo. I was across the POC. Eventually, we brought other people in for the POC in terms of like SEs and stuff and field engineers, because it ended up being huge. We went on site with them. We were able to see what they wanted to implement, why, how, etc., all the way to the end of like contracts getting signed. And I would say that experience is awesome if you have like a couple of customers that you're working with. But of course, when you're talking to 20 different customers a week, that obviously is incredibly difficult. So that's one scenario that comes to mind that was a great experience because it allows for a couple things. Number one, you're doing the discovery, so you know what they need and what they don't need. Right? It's not like this person does discovery, it's being handed off, it hands off to this person. Before you know it, you're not in the loop and you don't really understand what's happening at this point. So having the ability to go from start to finish ensures that you have all the information that you need to make the customer successful. There's a couple of different processes. Like a company wants to sell a product, and then once that product is sold, the company wants to keep existing customers because existing customers are cheaper than new customers in terms of like time spent, onboarding, etc. Renewals are a lot cheaper than a new customer. So like the pre-sales have always been, the getting the customer on board, and then the post-sales has always been ensuring that they're successful in production so they renew, right? That's the gist of how it works. So knowing that that's the whole cycle, really what you want is, as the engineer on the product, you don't want the customer to have to like go and rip out your solution for something else because you didn't explain it right, because you didn't do proper discovery, because you didn't think about the implementation. Oh, they're a GitOps shop, so they have to do things with GitOps. Do you have Helm charts? Are you declarative YAML configurations? How are you implementing and deploying the product and this and that? And then you also have to think about, I have to sell it to the engineers, but you also have to have the ability to go and talk to the execs. The execs care about, is this thing going to drive business value? The engineers care about, is this going to solve a solution? So having the ability to go through that whole cycle and see it from beginning to end, I think is really, really important for every FDE. And then in terms of things of like where it went wrong, in my opinion, it's two things. It's not asking the right questions and not truly understanding the technology. Because a perfect example is with agent sandboxing right now. So agent sandboxing is a very big topic. There's a lot of different sandboxes out there. A lot of people are talking about how to implement sandboxes. But then as you dive deeper, you have to ask the questions like, okay, you want a sandbox. Okay, why do you want a sandbox? Well, I want isolation. I want to ensure that agent A can't talk to agent B. I want to make sure agent A can't access the production file system on the server that it's running on. Cool. Okay, makes sense. Do you want software isolation with something like gvisor? Or do you want hardware isolation with something like micro VM? What does that mean? Well, when you're doing software isolation, you're essentially in the user process. When you are doing hardware isolation with something like micro VM, there's like a watered down little Linux kernel that gets spun up, and that's where all your process is running. Drastically different methods of implementing sandboxing. But if you don't know that, and the customer is talking to you about your sandbox solution or a sandbox solution that you're going to implement for them, they can't make a definitive choice if they don't have all the information. And as the FDE or the solutions architect or even the pre-sales engineer, whoever it is, they're coming to you for your expert opinion, especially in the AI space. Because what everybody has to remember is this isn't like 20-year-old technology where somebody's buying a product and putting it into an environment that's been there for 20 years. If you're an FDE now, if you've been an FDE in the past 6 months, if you're going to be an FDE in the next 12 months, chances are 99.999% of the time, you're going to be working in a greenfield environment. And because it's a greenfield environment and because it's all new, the engineers that are coming to you and your solution, they don't know the answer. So you have to have the ability to give them the answer. Really, it's like being a consultant. And I think that's why the transition for me was a little bit more straightforward than most, because I came from being self-employed. I came from being a consultant. So I came from managing the whole cycle from first initial call to closing the deal. That's my take on it. It's just make sure that you're asking the right questions, make sure that you're diving into the technology that you're implementing in production.
I'm trying to extract the insights of so connecting the dots with building cool things and then make sure you have that impact. I think this is huge for an FDE because an FDE might be working with the decision makers in a greenfield environment, giving them a broader, a holistic view of what the problem is, because sometimes it's even harder to figure out the problems. So in your case, from a technology perspective, what you explained, what was the problem that they're trying to solve and how did you end up giving them a solution?
So in that particular instance, it was all about AI security. So like they wanted security, they wanted governance, and they wanted observability from point A to point B. Point A is an agent or maybe a chatbot. Point B is an LLM, an MCP server, or another agent. So when you go from point A to point B, there's always a line of communication in the middle. That line of communication is always going to be some type of AI gateway. So in this particular instance, that's really what it came down to. They're a financial institution. They need good data exposed. They need good traces. They need good metrics. They need good logs. They need the ability to see what's connecting to what, how it's connecting. Are you doing like standard token exchange? Or are you doing OIDC based OAuth? How are you connecting to the agent? How is the agent connecting to the LLM or the MCP server? So in their case, that was the gist. I would say I see three things right now across the majority of customers. The top three things are security and governance for AI, sandboxing, and observability. How did the agent perform? Do you have like agent evals in place where you have like a golden eval set, or your golden eval set as a trace of an agent that did its job perfectly, and then you're comparing that against another trace, right? Did it pass? How many tokens did it use? Did it hallucinate? And then standard traces, logs, metrics. So I would say those are like the three biggest things right now.
Sure. I think you're bringing all of those difficult problems, right?
Yeah.
So how did you solution it?
Yeah, because 3 steps. Ask the customer what they want. Ensure it's what they actually want, which is what we were talking about, right? And the third thing, which is arguably the most important thing, but you can't get to it unless you do the first 2 things, tie it back to business value. So like You want governance. Why do you want governance? Oh, because I want to make sure that my agents aren't doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Okay, that makes sense. And that's a logical reason. But is that an important enough reason for leadership? Or is the more important reason we have auditors that come in every 4 months? So we need to ensure that not only do we have proper governance, but we have proper observability around what our agents are talking to. Now we've come to an actual business value. We've tied the technology back to the business value. And then once you have that, then you can cater your demo or your POC to that use case. And this is another big thing for me. I never do canned demos. There's a lot of people that like they'll have a specific demo. That's the one that they use for all the customers. I don't do that. I just spend the extra time to build out a custom demo specifically for that customer. I don't like doing canned demos because you can show them the nifty stuff, but you can't tie that back to their specific business value. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to get them to buy the product. And that's what's going to get them to renew the product. You know, the nifty features and stuff, yeah, that's cool. That's great. That gets them excited. But at some point during the cycle, that excitement turns into going and talking to their leadership and their leadership saying, how does this fix XYZ? Right. But if you give them how to fix XYZ right from the beginning, I personally think it's a much smoother process.
I 100% can imagine your demo talking about here is the problem, here is the solution, and then here is how it's connected to your business problem and then
Yep.
impact. If I go back to my early career, I tend to miss that in the demos where I used to do, here is the great cool thing which I have built. And the next question always was, so what? That's huge. And one of the underrated skills for an FDE is to have that time mechanism to, and also like make it a process. So you have to have very much specialized problem set and the solution that's being solved for that specific problem.
You know, the other thing too is I hear a lot, oh, I don't have the time to do that. Well, then work an extra hour. Do you want to do the thing right or not? That's the question that you have to ask yourself. If you want to do it right, sometimes you got to put in a little bit of extra time to make sure that it's right. Since I'm going to be doing it for a while and it takes up a lot of my time, I'm doing it the right way. That's the way I think about my career.
The way I see it these days is instead of working on that extra hour, try to see if you can use AI to make that efficient.
Yeah, but however you decide to do it. If it's an extra 30 minutes with AI, if it's an extra hour ensuring that AI generated it for you, but do you understand it? Because that's another big thing too, right? AI can generate really great demos for you, but when the customer asks you, why did you do this in the demo? How does this connect to this? Do you know? If not, you should spend that hour.
Yeah, I think you are bringing up a controversial topic of being a senior engineer versus like a senior engineer.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Yeah. Like, can you properly explain? And because this is another thing too, especially with the FTE role. Remember, you are working with customers and they think that you're the SME. It's totally okay to not have every single answer. It is totally okay to say, you know what? It's a good question. I'm going to go back to products and I'm going to get an answer for you. That's totally okay. What's not okay is if you use AI to build out some demo and you click a couple buttons and run some commands and say, hooray. And then when the customer says, what is this? Why did you do this? What is this all about? And you can't answer it because you didn't put in the time to figure it out. That's a problem.
I totally agree with you because even before it was like that too. You might take a demo and then show it to the customer. And then if they ask a question, if you don't have an answer, then you are responsible for what you're showing.
And you're responsible for being the SME. Remember, customer is paying a stupid amount of money to buy your product. If they lose faith in you, that's the worst possible thing that can happen. Like as an FDE, your customer losing faith in you is the equivalent of you bringing down your production database with zero backups. If it happens, it's a big deal.
Let's talk about like what you use from an FDE perspective. Do you have like specific set of tools at Solo or in general working with the customers?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit old school, so I still like to have my IDE. So I'm always in VS Code. I have my terminal on my right side, so I'll have 40-inch monitor. So, I have a browser up, I have VS Code up. I'm split between whatever code I'm looking at and the terminal. I'm usually in either open code or Grok. I've actually been using Grok Build and Grok 4.5 a lot lately, and I'm really enjoying it. But aside from that, I'm always in open code, and I'm switching between like GPT 5.6 and Fable. I've always been a bigger fan of GPT models. I don't know if it's the way that I work or the questions I ask or how I ask them or whatever. A lot of the work that I do is the agent can't go and just search it on Google. I'm usually working on the new stuff. So there may not be a specialized doc for it or a reference architecture. So what I'm asking it is more like engineering centric questions. Go look at the code base, see why this is the etc. So I'm deeper level, and I've always found that like GPT is a little bit better than Claude models for that type of stuff, and it can be a little bit cheaper as well. So that's essentially what I use. Is I'm just always in VS Code. In terms of models, just the provider-based model, I do a little bit of local model stuff, but I would say that's more like hobbyist versus like my day-to-day. I've still yet to fine-tune a model and have it work and perform the same way that I can get with like Grok 4.5 or GPT or something along those lines. But yeah, those are pretty much the tools that I use. I come from a programming background, so I'm just living in IDs and terminals.
Yeah, I know you're spending a ton of time with Hermes these days. Is that going away from OpenClaw to Hermes? And how is that like tied to the customer? Do you use that for the customers at all?
Yeah, so like we have customers that run on every single type of harness that you can think of. OpenClaw, Nemo Claude, Claude Code, Codex, AWS Agent Core, Microsoft Foundry, like any harness that you can think of. We have customers that are running on it. For me personally, like my personal work, I'm still very much like open code. I don't use Hermes a whole lot. I don't use like Claude Code a whole lot or Codex a whole lot, because again, my job, my day to day is more like the engineering and like figuring out how things work and then like maybe creating a demo or something out of it, versus like, having this autonomous agent do XYZ for me, right? I don't personally need that yet in my day to day, just because of how deep I am in the technology at the moment with technology that's very new. So a good example is Agent Substrate. Like this is, my opinion, is going to be the sandbox for agents, but it's like a 3-month-old OSS project coming out of Google. So like aside from the code base, it's not like you have crazy documentation or like production use cases. There aren't any. So I got to be deep in the agent, asking specific questions, feeding specific code examples, versus just an autonomous agent in a harness going and doing things for me. So I'm like a little lower level.
Got it. Yeah, this is very fascinating and different kind of FDE exposure and FDE tools in the daily life, which I think it's expected, especially if you're in the platform world and if you're a developer. So are you hiring FDEs? If so, what are you expecting from them? Are there any suggestions, like there's a book, maybe there is like a course, maybe there's a person they can probably learn and get used to and upskill themselves?
Yeah. So in terms of FTE, like it's a new title for something that we've already been doing, but it's combining a couple different things. So there's 2 resources that I would give. The first, whatever your technology is that you're working on, dive deep into it. Whether it's the code base, whether it's docs, whatever it is, dive deep into it, right? So that's the first resource is whatever the technology you're using is, dive deep. The second one, there's a book called The Trusted Advisor, and it's a book built more for sales engineering. The premise of it is for the sales engineer, but I would argue it's for everybody in pre-sales and post-sales and FT, because it teaches you how to be open, be honest, and communicate and build trust with your customers, because that's what you ultimately want to do.
I can imagine the concepts, but I'm hearing about the book for the first time.
It's pretty good. I really, really enjoyed the book. It's more about like developing like your communication skills and stuff versus like a technical book. Because as an FTE and post-sales, pre-sales, half of it is the technology, and then the other half of it is being a person and talking to people and communicating with people.
What Michael is suggesting you to become is, one, become that expert or the SME for the topic that you're choosing. And the second, become that people harness.
100%. Yep. I like the people harness thing. I'm gonna steal that from you.
It's good. Thanks so much, Michael. This is great. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks all for watching and listening to FDE Talks. This is Kanti Manchikanti, and see you all soon.